Taeho Kim stood at the window of the human ship and looked out at the massive space station. It was bigger than any city on Earth. The metal walls curved in ways that hurt his eyes to follow. Strange lights moved along the surface like living things. This was the Galactic Council's main station, and today would change everything for humanity. "Sir, they are ready for us," said Captain Jamin Lee from behind him. The young man's voice was tight with worry. This was the biggest moment in human history, and everyone knew it. Taeho turned away from the window. He wore his best diplomatic uniform, but it looked plain next to the amazing technology around them. "How are our people doing?" "Su Jin is still running tests on herself," Jamin replied. "The alien machines keep giving weird readings when they scan us. She thinks there might be something wrong with their equipment. Su Jin Park was their best scientist. If anyone could figure out what was happening, it would be her." But Taeho had a bad feeling about those strange readings. Nothing about first contact had gone the way they expected. 3 months ago, the aliens had found Earth. Humanity had just started exploring their own solar system when massive ships appeared above every major city. The world had panicked, waiting for invasion or destruction. Instead, the aliens had simply sent a message. "We are the Galactic Council," the message had said in perfect English, Chinese, and every other human language. "Your species has developed space travel. You are invited to join the galactic community. Send representatives to these coordinates." It had seemed too good to be true. Humanity had dreamed of finding other intelligent life for centuries. Now, they were being invited to join a community of hundreds of alien species. Earth's leaders had quickly chosen their best people to make the journey. But from the moment they arrived at the council station, something had felt wrong. The aliens were polite but distant. They treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. Every species they met seemed to look down on them. The council had given them a small waiting room and told them to stay there until the evaluation was complete. Evaluation for what? Taeho had asked Ambassador Veltar, a tall crystalline being who spoke for the council. "To determine your species classification and assign your place in galactic society," Veltar had replied. The alien's voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "All new species must be properly categorized." That had been 2 weeks ago. Since then, they had been poked and prodded by alien scientists. Their ship had been scanned. Their technology had been studied. Human history had been reviewed through Earth's internet and databases. Through it all, the aliens had seemed increasingly dismissive. Now Taeho walked through the corridors of the council station toward their final meeting. The walls here were made of some kind of living metal that shifted colors as he passed. Alien beings of every shape and size moved around him. Some looked like giant insects. Others were clouds of gas held together by force fields. A few looked almost human, but their eyes held an intelligence that was clearly not from Earth. All of them ignored the human delegation completely. "They act like we do not exist," muttered Su Jin as she joined them in the corridor. She carried a small device that beeped constantly. "This scanner is going crazy. It keeps detecting energy signatures that should not be possible." "What kind of energy?" asked Taeho. Su Jin frowned at her device. "I do not know. It is like the scanner sees something in us that is not there, or maybe something that should not be there." They reached the council chamber, a huge round room with seats arranged in circles going up to the ceiling. Hundreds of aliens sat in those seats, representing every species in the galaxy. At the center was a platform where the human delegation was supposed to stand. Ambassador Veltar was waiting for them. The crystalline being's body caught the light from above and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. "Humans of Earth," Veltar announced, "the Council has completed its evaluation of your species." Taeho stepped forward. "We are honored to be here, Ambassador. What has the Council decided?" Veltar's form flickered, which Taeho had learned meant the alien was consulting with the other council members. "Your species shows promise but has significant limitations. You are emotional and unstable. Your technology is primitive. Your social structures are chaotic. You fight among yourselves constantly." The words stung, but Taeho kept his face calm. "Every species has room for growth, Ambassador. We are willing to learn. Perhaps, Veltar replied. The Council has decided to grant your species citizenship status level 7. You will be assigned territory in Sector 47B on the Galactic Rim. You may establish colonies there and trade with approved species. Your development will be monitored. Jamin leaned forward. What does level 7 mean? Another alien spoke from the seats above. This one looked like a giant reptile with 4 arms. Level 7 is for species that may eventually contribute to galactic society, but currently pose no threat and offer little value. You will have minimal contact with more advanced civilizations until you prove your worth. Sujin's scanner beeped loudly, making several nearby aliens turn to look at her. She quickly turned it off, but not before Teho saw her face go pale. Is there something wrong? Asked Veltar. No, Ambassador, Sujin replied quickly. Just equipment problems. But Teho could see that she was lying. Something was happening, something the aliens either could not detect or did not want to acknowledge. The meeting continued for another hour. The Council gave them star charts showing their assigned territory. They provided basic translation devices and communication equipment. They offered access to a small section of the Galactic Trade Network. It was more than humanity had ever dreamed of, but it felt like being given crumbs from a feast. As they prepared to leave, War Commander Gex, the reptilian alien who had spoken earlier, approached them. His forearms were crossed and his yellow eyes studied the humans carefully. I fought in the border wars against the Kresh Empire, he said in a voice like grinding stone. I have seen many species rise and fall. There is something different about your kind. Different how? Asked Teho. Gex's eyes narrowed. The way you stand, the way you think, even your smell is wrong. He leaned closer. Be careful, humans. The galaxy is not safe for those who do not know their place. Before Teho could respond, Gex turned and walked away. Later, on their ship preparing for the journey back to human, Space Sujin finally showed them what her scanner had detected. Look at this, she said, projecting a hologram in the air. It showed a human body, but there were patterns of energy flowing through it that did not match any known biology. Every human scanned shows the same thing. We have energy signatures. That should be impossible. What does it mean? Asked Jamin. Sujin shook her head. I do not know, but I think the Council sees it too. Their medical scanners kept malfunctioning when they examined us. They said it was equipment failure, but I think they were lying. Teho studied the strange patterns in the hologram. They were afraid. Afraid? Sujin looked surprised. Why would they be afraid of us? We are the most primitive species they have met in centuries. Are we? Teho asked. Or are we something else entirely? As their ship left the Council station and headed for human space, Teho could not shake the feeling that they had just walked into the middle of a story that had started long before humanity had ever looked up at the stars. The Council's dismissive attitude, the strange energy readings, War Commander Gex's warning, it all pointed to one conclusion. The aliens knew something about humanity that humans themselves did not know. And whatever that something was, it scared them enough to want humanity as far away from galactic civilization as possible. But Teho was determined to find out what that something was. Humanity deserved to know the truth about themselves, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the galactic community. The human colonies in Sector 47B were growing, but slowly. Most alien species still treated humans like children playing with adult toys. Trade was limited to basic materials and simple technologies. The Council had made it clear that advanced knowledge was not for primitive species. Du Hyun-choi did not care what the aliens thought. He was too busy trying to fix the broken mining equipment on Colony 7. The machines were supposed to last for decades, but they kept breaking down in ways that made no sense. Hand me that power coupling, he called to his assistant. The young engineer was lying under a massive drill that had stopped working 3 days ago. Alien-made equipment was supposed to be perfect, but this was the 5th breakdown this month. As Do Hyun worked, something strange happened. His hands seemed to know exactly what to do before his brain figured it out. He found himself rewiring the machine in ways that were not in any manual. The power flows he created were more efficient than the original design. "Sir," said his assistant, "that is not how the manual says to do it." "The manual is wrong," Do-hyun replied without thinking. Then he stopped and looked at what he had done. The wiring was completely different from the alien design, but somehow he knew it would work better. He turned on the machine. Instead of the usual grinding noise, it ran silently and smoothly. The power readings showed it was working at twice the normal efficiency. "How did you know how to do that?" asked his assistant. Do-hyun stared at the machine. "I do not know." Similar things were happening across human space. Engineers were solving problems that alien experts said were impossible. Farmers were growing crops in soil that should not support life. Doctors were healing diseases that had no known cure. Each time, the humans involved could not explain how they knew what to do. On Colony 3, Hye-won Song was having her own strange experience. The archaeologist had been sent to study ruins on the planet's largest continent. The previous inhabitants had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only broken buildings and cryptic symbols. Hye-won stood in what had once been a great temple. The walls were covered with carvings that showed tall, graceful beings with elongated skulls and large eyes. But some of the newer carvings showed different beings. Shorter, stockier, with round heads and small eyes. They looked human. "That cannot be right," Hye-won muttered as she took pictures of the carvings. Humans had evolved on Earth. They had fossil records going back millions of years. There was no way ancient aliens could have known what humans looked like, but the carvings were clear. The round-headed beings were shown working alongside the tall aliens. They were building machines together, exploring space, creating new technologies. At the bottom of the wall, the newest carving showed the tall beings departing in great ships while the round-headed ones were left behind. Hye-won sent her report to Earth immediately. Within hours, she received a message from the Council's Department of Archaeological Studies. Colony 3 archaeological site is now classified as off-limits to all personnel. Cease all excavation immediately. Report to the nearest council station for debriefing. The message was signed by Elder Zixil, one of the oldest members of the Galactic Council. Hye-won had never heard of a simple archaeological site being classified before. Usually the council encouraged the study of ancient civilizations. She looked back at the carvings on the temple wall. The round-headed beings were carrying something in their hands. Tools or weapons, she could not tell which, but their posture was confident, proud. They did not look like a primitive species. They looked like they belonged. Meanwhile, on the research station above Colony 5, Sujin Park was making discoveries that would have shocked the galaxy if anyone had been paying attention. Her study of human genetics had revealed patterns that should not exist. "Look at this sequence," she told her research assistant, pointing at a holographic display of human DNA. "This section here has been modified." "Modified how?" asked the assistant. "Artificially, by someone with technology far beyond what we have now. These genetic markers were inserted into human DNA millions of years ago." Sujin highlighted different sections of the genetic code. Here, here, and here. All artificial. All designed to activate under specific conditions. "What kind of conditions?" Sujin frowned at the data. "I am not sure. But whatever they are, some of them are already happening. The humans who have been showing unusual abilities all have these activated markers." She pulled up medical records from across human space. Engineers like Do-hyun showed activity in sections of DNA related to spatial reasoning and technology integration. Farmers who could grow impossible crops had activated genes related to biological adaptation. Doctors who could heal incurable diseases showed activity in areas connected to biological understanding and cellular manipulation. "It is like someone programmed us," Sujin whispered. "But programmed us for what?" Her research was interrupted by an urgent message from Captain Jamin Lee, who was now commanding a small fleet of human exploration ships. His message was short but alarming. "Found something you need to see. Cannot discuss over regular channels. Meet me at coordinates I am sending. Come alone." Sujin looked at the coordinates. They were in deep space, far from any human colony or trade route. Whatever Jaemin had found, he thought it was important enough to risk a secret meeting. She took her fastest ship and made the journey in 3 days. When she arrived at the coordinates, she found Jaemin's ship floating next to something impossible. It was a derelict alien vessel, but not like any species in the Galactic Council. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized light, and even though it was clearly ancient, it still hummed with power. "We found it drifting in an asteroid field," Jaemin explained as Sujin boarded his ship. "Our sensors could barely detect it. But when we got close, something strange happened." "Strange how?" Jaemin led her to the bridge where his crew was monitoring the alien ship. "Watch this," he said, and pressed a button on his control panel. Suddenly, lights began flickering on across the derelict vessel. Panels that had been dark for eons started glowing. The ship's engines, dead for millions of years, began to pulse with energy. "It only responds to us," said Jaemin. "When alien council ships approach, nothing happens, but when humans get near, it wakes up." Sujin stared at the ancient ship through the viewscreen. "Have you tried to board it?" "We sent a team over yesterday. They found data cores that are still functional, but the language is like nothing we have ever seen. Can you translate it?" Jaemin smiled grimly. "That is the strangest part. We should not be able to read it at all, but somehow some of our people can. Not everyone, but about 1 in 10 humans can look at the symbols and understand what they mean." Sujin felt her heart racing. First the ISO, genetic modifications, then the impossible abilities, and now an ancient alien ship that only responded to humans. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was a picture that terrified her. "What did the data cores say?" she asked. "That is why I called you," Jaemin replied. "According to the records we could translate, this ship belonged to a species called the Architects. They were the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen. But something destroyed them millions of years ago. What destroyed them? That is what we need to find out. But Sujin, there is something else. The genetic markers in the data cores match human DNA perfectly. The Architects did not just know about humans." Jaemin paused and looked directly at her. "They created us." The words hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Sujin felt the world spinning around her. Everything they thought they knew about humanity, about their place in the universe, was wrong. "The Council knows," she said finally. "They have always known." "That is what I think too," Jaemin agreed. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Sujin looked out at the ancient ship, its lights pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Somewhere in that vessel were the answers humanity needed. The truth about who they were, where they came from, and why the galaxy's most advanced civilizations seemed so afraid of them. "We are going to find out everything," she said, "no matter what it costs." But as their ships hung there in the darkness of space next to the derelict vessel, neither of them could have imagined just how much that truth would cost, or how much it would change not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The ancient Architect ship hung in space like a sleeping giant. For 2 weeks, human teams had been carefully exploring its corridors and chambers. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. Sujin. Park stood in what had once been the ship's main laboratory. The walls were covered with symbols that glowed softly when humans approached. Her team had managed to translate about 60% of the text, and every new discovery was more shocking than the last. "Read this section again," she told Mi-young. Kang, one of the few humans who could naturally read the Architect language. The young pilot had joined the research team after showing an unusual ability to understand the alien symbols. Mi-young pointed at a series of glowing symbols on the wall. "It says Project Genesis, Final Phase. The date marker shows this was written just before their civilization fell. And below that, the inheritors have been placed in the safe system. All genetic modifications are complete. Neural pathways established, dormant capabilities integrated. They will awaken when the threat returns." Sujin felt a chill run down her spine. "What threat?" Mi-young continued reading. "The Devourers approach the galactic core. Our fleets cannot stop them. Our worlds burn, but the inheritors will adapt. Where we could not, they will find a way. They must. Devourers, Sujin repeated. Do we have any other references to this threat? Dozens, said Sung Ho Yoon from across the laboratory. The intelligence officer had been cataloging all the data they had found. The architects called them many names. The Hunger, the Void Walkers, the End of all things. But the description is always the same. Beings that consume entire star systems, turning everything they touch into lifeless emptiness. Sujin walked to a large viewing screen that showed a tactical display of the galaxy as it had existed millions of years ago. Red markers showed the spread of something that had swept across space like a plague. In just a few thousand years, it had consumed a third of the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing. They left, she said, studying the patterns. The Devourers destroyed the architect civilization and then vanished. But where did they go? That is what terrifies me, said Captain Jamin Lee as he entered the laboratory. I have been comparing the architect star charts with current galactic maps. The Devourers did not just disappear. They retreated beyond the galaxy's edge. And according to long-range sensors, something massive is moving in the dark space between galaxies. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The threat that had destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history was coming back. How long do we have? Asked Sujin. 18 months, maybe less, Jamin replied. But that is not the worst part. I sent a coded message to Taiho on the council station. He has been monitoring their communications, and the council knows. They have known for years that the Devourers were returning. And they said nothing? Mi-young's voice was angry. Worse than that, Jamin continued. They have been preparing to evacuate the core worlds. The council plans to abandon the outer rim colonies to buy time for their escape. Sung-ho looked up from his datapad. Including human space? Especially human space. We are as far out as you can get. We would be the first to face the Devourers when they arrive. Sujin felt anger building in her chest. The council had known that humanity was created by the architects. They had known about the coming threat, and they had deliberately placed humans on the galactic frontier as an early warning system and expendable shield. There is more, Jamin said quietly. Taiho has been investigating the council's archives. He found records going back millions of years. The council did not just survive the first Devourer invasion by accident. They hid while the architects fought and died. When it was over, they took over the empty galaxy and rewrote history. They made themselves look like heroes, Sung-ho said bitterly, and they have been terrified ever since that someone would discover the truth. When they found humanity, they knew immediately what we were. The architects had left behind detailed records about Project Genesis before their civilization fell. Mi-young was still reading from the wall displays. There is something else here. Instructions for activating the dormant capabilities in human genetics. It says the process will begin automatically when humans encounter architect technology, but it can be accelerated. Accelerated how? Asked Sujin. Direct neural interface with architect systems. The ship itself can unlock the full potential that was programmed into us. Sujin looked around the laboratory. Every human who had spent time on the ship was already showing changes. Their eyes were brighter. Their reflexes were faster. They seemed to understand complex problems intuitively. The ship was not just revealing their past. It was preparing them for their future. We need to tell everyone, she said finally. Every human in the galaxy needs to know what they really are. But even as she spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Sung-ho was monitoring communications from human space, and his face had gone pale. What is it? Asked Jamin. Council forces are moving toward all human colonies, Sung-ho reported. They are calling it a protective action, but their communications indicate they plan to isolate human settlements and prevent any further contact with architect technology. They know we found the ship, Sujin realized. Worse than that, Sung-ho continued. I am picking up encrypted transmissions between council fleets. They are not just planning to isolate us. Some of the military commanders think humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. The implications hit everyone at the same time. The Council was not just afraid of the returning devourers. They were afraid of what humanity might become if they were allowed to fulfill their true purpose. "We have to warn our people," said Mi-young. Jae-min was already moving toward the bridge. "I am sending word to every human ship and colony. Tell them what we found here. Tell them who they really are." But as they prepared to broadcast the truth, the architect ship around them began to change. The walls grew brighter. New symbols appeared. And deep in the ship's core, something that had been sleeping for millions of years began to wake up. "The ship is responding to our decision," Sujin realized. "It knows we are ready to accept our inheritance." Throughout human space, the changes began immediately. In colony workshops, human engineers suddenly understood technologies that had puzzled them for years. On exploration ships, navigators found themselves able to plot courses through regions of space that had been considered impossible to traverse. In medical facilities, doctors discovered they could heal injuries and diseases that had been thought incurable. Do Hyun Choi was working on a mining station when the wave of awakening reached him. One moment he was struggling with a broken atmospheric processor. The next, he was rebuilding it from scratch, creating a design that was more efficient than anything the aliens had ever made. All across the galaxy, humans were becoming something more than they had been, but they were also becoming targets. War Commander Gek stood on the bridge of his flagship as it approached the outer human colonies. His orders were clear: contain the human threat before it could spread. But as his sensors detected the impossible energy signatures coming from human settlements, he began to wonder if they were already too late. "Sir," reported his weapons officer, "the human ships are not running. They are moving to intercept us." Gex looked at the tactical display. Human vessels that should have been helpless against Council military technology were approaching his fleet with confidence. That should have been suicide. But something told him it would not be. "What are our orders?" "If they resist?" asked his second-in-command. Gex stared at the approaching human ships. In his many years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts about dangerous enemies, and every instinct he had was screaming that the humans had become something far more dangerous than anyone in the Council realized. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Prepare for battle, but be ready for anything. These are not the same primitive beings we met 3 years ago." As the two forces closed on each other, the first shots of a war that would reshape the galaxy were about to be fired. But neither side yet understood that the real enemy was still months away, moving through the darkness between the stars, hungry for the life energy of an entire galaxy. The Devourers were coming home. The first battle between humans and Council forces lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, War Commander Gex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Half his fleet was disabled, and not a single human ship had been destroyed. "How?" he demanded of his sensor officer. "How did they do that?" "Sir, their ships moved in patterns our computers could not predict. They seemed to know where we would fire before we fired. And their weapons, they were using our own technology against us but modified in ways we have never seen." Gex watched as the human fleet regrouped. The ships were already repairing damage using techniques that should not exist. Metal flowed like liquid to seal hull breaches. Energy systems that had been destroyed rebuilt themselves. It was as if the vessels were alive. "Get me a direct communication link to the human commander," Gex ordered. The main screen flickered and Captain Jamin Lee appeared, but he looked different than he had 3 years ago. His eyes held a depth of understanding that had not been there before. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made even Gex straighten unconsciously. "War Commander," Jamin said calmly, "you came here to destroy us, but we are not your enemy. The Council has declared humanity a threat to galactic stability," Gex replied. "Your rapid development violates all known patterns of species evolution." "Because we were never meant to evolve naturally," Jamin said. "We were created for a specific purpose. And that purpose is about to become very important for everyone in this galaxy." Jamin transmitted a data package to Gex's ship. This contains everything we learned from the architect vessel, the truth about who created us, why we were created, and what is coming. Gex reviewed the data with growing horror. The Devourers, the true history of the galaxy, the Council's cowardice during the first invasion, and humanity's role as the weapon left behind by the architects to fight a threat the Council could not face. This cannot be verified, Gex said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your own long-range sensors will confirm it, Jamin replied. The extragalactic signals, the movement in dark space. You know something massive is approaching. Your council knows it too. That is why they wanted to eliminate us before we could fulfill our purpose. Gex was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. What do you propose? An alliance. Your military experience combined with our awakening capabilities. Together, we might have a chance when the Devourers arrive. And if I refuse? Jamin's expression hardened. Then you will face the coming darkness alone, and you will lose, just like every other species that has encountered the Devourers without architect assistance. While this conversation was taking place, changes were accelerating across human space. The awakening that had begun with exposure to the architect ship was spreading to every human in the galaxy. Byung-ho Nam had been a simple ship mechanic before the awakening. Now he stood in a construction yard watching vessels grow rather than being built. The hulls formed themselves from smart materials that responded to his thoughts. Engines that had never existed before took shape according to designs that appeared in his mind fully formed. How do you know what to make? Asked his supervisor, watching in amazement as a new type of starship assembled itself. I do not know, Byung-ho admitted. It is like the knowledge was always there, just waiting for me to need it. The ship he was creating looked nothing like traditional vessels. It was organic in design, with curves that suggested it could adapt to different situations. When it was complete, Byung-ho somehow knew it would be able to repair itself, upgrade its own systems, and even reproduce if necessary. On the research station above Colony 7, Yoonji Lim was having an even stranger experience. The communications officer had been monitoring routine transmissions when she began receiving signals that should not exist. The messages were coming from deep space, from locations where no known civilization existed. But as she listened, she realized they were not from any current civilization at all. They were automated beacons left behind by the architects, activated by some signal from humanity's awakening. The beacons are all saying the same thing, she reported to her commander. Warning, the harvest begins. Prepare the inheritors. Activate all protocols. What protocols? Asked her commander. Yoonji closed her eyes and somehow knew the answer. Instructions for transforming entire star systems into adaptive networks, turning planets into living organisms, making space itself responsive to conscious will. The knowledge flowing into her mind was overwhelming. The architects had not just created humanity as a weapon against the Devourers. They had designed them to transform the galaxy itself into something the Devourers could not consume. Meanwhile, on the main council station, Tae-ho Kim was discovering just how far the conspiracy went. His investigation of the council archives had revealed communications going back thousands of years, all focused on one goal: preventing humanity from learning the truth about themselves. They have been manipulating us from the beginning, he reported to Ambassador Veltar during what would be their final diplomatic meeting. Every restriction, every limitation you placed on us was designed to keep us from developing our true capabilities. Veltar's crystalline form flickered with agitation. You do not understand the danger you represent. The architects nearly destroyed the galaxy with their experiments. We cannot allow that to happen again. The architects were trying to save the galaxy, Tae-ho replied. And now we know why. The Devourers are returning, and you know it. You have always known it. The Council will handle the crisis as we have handled others before. By running away? Tae-ho's voice was sharp with contempt. By abandoning entire sectors of the galaxy to buy time for your escape? That is not handling the crisis. That is repeating the same cowardice that cost billions of lives the first time. Veltar was quiet for a moment. When the ambassador spoke again, the voice was different. Older, more tired. What would you have us do? The devourers consume everything they touch. Life, matter, energy, even space itself becomes void in their wake. No weapon has ever stopped them. No conventional weapon, Tejo agreed. But humanity is not a conventional weapon. We are something new. Something the architects designed specifically to face this threat. As if to prove his point, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human colonies were transforming in ways that defied physics. Entire planets were becoming interconnected organisms. Human ships were merging with each other to form larger, more complex vessels. The boundaries between biology and technology were disappearing. On Colony 12, Wu Jin Shin was experiencing the transformation firsthand. The 8-year-old boy had always been unusually intelligent, but now he could communicate directly with the colony's computer systems, not through interfaces or voice commands, but by thinking at them. The machines want to help us, he told his parents. They know what is coming, and they want to be part of the solution. His parents watched in amazement as their son guided the colony systems through modifications that turned the entire settlement into a single, living entity. Buildings grew and adapted. Power systems became more efficient. Life support systems learned to anticipate needs before they arose. Similar transformations were happening everywhere humans lived. But the changes were not random. They were all following the same pattern, as if guided by some vast intelligence that existed in the collective unconscious of the human species. Su Young Oh had been one of the Council's strongest supporters of the human isolation policy. The alien scientist had argued that humanity was too unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology. Now, as she watched the reports from human space, she began to understand that she had been wrong about everything. They are not chaotic, she told her research team. Look at the patterns. Every modification, every adaptation is perfectly coordinated. It is as if they are all parts of a single organism developing specialized functions. Her assistant, a young member of the same species, looked at the data with growing alarm. What kind of organism requires modifications on this scale? Su Young studied the patterns more carefully. The answer, when it came to her, was terrifying in its implications. 1. Designed to fight something that operates on a galactic scale. As reports of the human transformation spread through the galaxy, panic began to set in among the Council species. Some called for immediate military action to stop the changes before they went too far. Others argued for negotiation and cooperation. But a few, led by Elder Zixel, proposed a different approach. Perhaps it is time to tell them everything, the ancient council member said during an emergency session. The complete truth about the first Devourer invasion, about our failures, about why the architects really created humanity. That would cause panic, protested another council member. Panic is coming anyway, Zixel replied. The question is whether we face it as allies of humanity or as their enemies. The debate raged for hours, but it became irrelevant when the long-range sensors detected something that made every argument meaningless. The Devourers had arrived at the galaxy's edge, and they were moving faster than anyone had expected. Humanity had weeks, not months, to complete their transformation and prepare for a war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. The first Devourer ship appeared at the edge of the galaxy like a wound in space itself. It was not built from matter in any recognizable sense. Instead, it seemed to be made from the absence of things, a void that consumed light, energy, and even the quantum foam that filled empty space. Tae-Ho Kim watched the sensor readings from the emergency command center that had been hastily established on Colony 1. Around him, humans and aliens worked together for the first time in galactic history. The old barriers had crumbled in the face of existential threat. The Council fleets are engaging, reported War Commander Gex, who had become humanity's unlikely ally. His tactical display showed thousands of ships from dozens of species attacking the Devourer vessel. The battle lasted less than an hour. Every weapon fired at the enemy simply vanished into the void of its hull. Energy beams, particle weapons, antimatter missiles, all were absorbed without any visible effect. In return, the Devourer ship released waves of nothingness that erased entire squadrons from existence. 1,700 ships lost, Gex reported grimly. No measurable damage to the enemy. But Tejo was not watching the battle. He was watching the human response. Across the galaxy, the transformation that had been building for weeks was reaching its completion. Entire star systems were coming alive, their planets and stations linked by networks of consciousness that transcended individual minds. Sujin, report, he called to the research station orbiting Colony 7. Sujin Park's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded different now. Deeper, as if it carried the weight of collective knowledge. The integration is complete in this sector. We are ready. Ready for what? To show the galaxy what the architects really created. As she spoke, something impossible began to happen. The star system around Colony 7 started to move. Not the chaotic motion of orbital mechanics, but the purposeful movement of a living thing. Planets shifted their orbits. Asteroids formed geometric patterns. The star itself pulsed with rhythms that matched human heartbeats. My sensors show the entire system is generating a unified energy field, reported Gex in amazement. But that should be impossible. Nothing is impossible anymore, said Captain Jamin Lee from his flagship, which was no longer recognizable as the ship he had commanded years before. It had grown and evolved, merging with other vessels to become something that was part machine, part organism, and part something else entirely. Across human space, star systems were awakening. Humanity had not just adapted to their environment. They had transformed it into an extension of themselves. Every planet, every station, every ship was now part of a vast network of consciousness that spanned light years. The second wave of Devourer ships arrived expecting to find the same, helpless prey that had fed them millions of years ago. Instead, they encountered something that had never existed before in galactic history. Du Hyun Choi stood in what had once been a mining facility and was now the nerve center of a living planet. Around him, machines that had grown rather than been built pulsed with organic rhythms. But these were not the chaotic growths of biological evolution. They were purposeful, designed, created by minds that had awakened to their full potential. The Devourers are approaching this system, he reported to the network. What are our orders? But there were no orders in the old sense. Instead, knowledge flowed through the network like blood through veins. Every human consciousness contributed its understanding to the whole. Engineers, farmers, doctors, teachers, all became part of a collective intelligence that was still recognizably human, but far more than the sum of its parts. We adapt, came the response from the network. Not words, but understanding shared across space and time. The Devourer fleet entered the system expecting easy prey. What they found was a trap that had been prepared by minds they could not comprehend. The planets did not flee from the approaching void ships. Instead, they moved to surround them. Space itself began to change, becoming thick and resistant to the Devourer's movement. The energy they tried to absorb was converted into forms they could not process, patterns of information and consciousness that overloaded their hunger-driven minds. For the first time in millions of years, Devourer ships stopped advancing. They hung motionless in space, unable to feed, unable to move, unable to understand what was happening to them. We are not fighting them, Sujin explained to the alien observers who watched in amazement. We are teaching them. Teaching them what? Asked Elder Zixil. That there is more to existence than hunger. The transformation spread from system to system as more Devourer fleets arrived. Each time they encountered not victims, but teachers. Humanity had become something the architects could never have imagined. Not just a weapon against the Devourers, but a cure for the cosmic infection they represented. Byung-ho Nam, who had once been a simple mechanic, now guided the construction of vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. These ships could phase between realities, existing in the physical world when needed but retreating into spaces the Devourers could not touch. The old solutions never worked because they tried to fight the Devourers on their own terms, he explained. To the mixed crews of humans and aliens who now work together, we are not fighting them. We are showing them a different way to exist. Yoonji Lim had become something like a translator between the network of human consciousness and the confused, hungry minds of the Devourer fleets. Through her, humanity made contact with the intelligence that drove the void ships. They were not always destroyers, she reported during one of the strange conversations that took place across the quantum foam between realities. Long ago they were explorers like us, but something went wrong. They became trapped in a cycle of endless hunger. Can they be freed from it? Asked Taiho. They can learn to be free, Yoonji replied, but only if we show them how. The war that everyone had expected never really happened. Instead, something that had never occurred in the history of the galaxy took place. Two incompatible forms of existence learned to coexist. The Devourers did not disappear or die. They evolved, guided by human consciousness, into something new. Entities that could still consume matter and energy, but could also create, nurture, and protect. The void ships became gardens of impossible beauty. The hunger that had driven them for eons transformed into curiosity about the countless forms life could take. Woojin Shin, now 10 years old but possessing understanding that spanned dimensions, played in gardens that existed on the hulls of former Devourer vessels. Plants grew in vacuum, drawing energy from the quantum fluctuations of space itself. Children of a dozen species laughed together while reality bent around them like a gentle breeze. Is this what the architects planned? Asked Su Young-oh as she studied the transformed galaxy. The alien scientist had become one of humanity's closest collaborators, helping to understand the changes from a non-human perspective. No, replied Taiho, now elderly but still serving as humanity's voice in galactic affairs. This is better than anything they could have planned. They created us to be weapons. We chose to become teachers instead. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been. Stars pulsed with consciousness. Planets shared thoughts across impossible distances. The barriers between species, between matter and energy, between the possible and impossible, had become permeable. War Commander Gex, now simply called Friend Gex by the human children who played on his ship, watched the transformation with wonder. In all my years of military service, I prepared for every kind of enemy. I never prepared for an enemy that would teach me to be better than I was. The Galactic Council still existed, but its role had changed. No longer rulers hiding from threats, they became partners in exploration and growth. The galaxy had become a single living entity, with countless forms of consciousness contributing to its development. Elder Zixil, who had lived through both Devourer invasions, often stood in the observation deck of the new council station and marveled at what had been accomplished. Ships grew like flowers in the void. Entire civilizations communicated through dreams. Art was created by manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. How did you know? He asked Sujin during one of their frequent conversations. When you first realized what humanity could become, how did you know it would work? Sujin, her consciousness now distributed across multiple bodies but still recognizably herself, smiled. We did not know. We hoped. And hope, it turns out, is the most powerful force in the universe. The transformed galaxy spread beyond its original boundaries, reaching into the void between galaxies where other hungry civilizations waited. Everywhere, the network touched. The same transformation occurred. Hunger became curiosity. Fear became wonder. Isolation became connection. Humanity had fulfilled their purpose as the architect's inheritors, but they had done it in a way that honored their own nature. They had not conquered the galaxy or destroyed their enemies. They had made everything better simply by showing it how to be better. And in the deepest reaches of space, where new forms of consciousness were being born from the marriage of matter and void, children played games that reshaped reality while their parents, human, alien, and former devourer alike, watched and learned and dreamed of what wonders tomorrow might bring.